My name is Tony James, and I'm the Director of Payment Security here for Target, not here. Thanks. And so today I'm here to talk to you about PCI compliance, or point-to-point encryption. I'm sorry, can we go back one slide? Thank you very much. And so the tagline here is why to do it, how to look at it, and what Target did. And so when I came up with this presentation a number of months back and presented this to the council, then reread it a couple of weeks ago, I thought, man, that tagline, that's kind of salesy. And so I should come out here and tell everybody, don't worry, I'm not trying to sell you anything. And then I read the rest of my presentation, and I realized I am. So I was wrong. But I'll be upfront, unlike most sales presentations you've probably been through. I'm trying to sell you on the concept of spending more time focused on your compliance programs. All jokes aside, I'm not joking. This is the slide where you can look at my picture and validate that this is who I say I am. And while you're doing that validation, I'm actually going to do something we probably don't do a whole lot here at the North American Community Meeting. I'm going to ask for a quick poll. So who here is using an end-to-end encryption solution? Well, that's a number of you. Okay, thank you. And who here is using a point-to-point encryption solution? Okay, thank you. So one, that helps me know, so I know who I'm talking to. But more importantly, we're here at a community meeting. And to develop that sense of community, now, hopefully you all know someone you can talk to, either to your right or to your left, in front of you, to either benchmark about your solution or learn about a solution that you might want to implement. You can always talk to me, but now you have other people you can talk to. And don't worry, I'll do that at the end so that you can know who to talk to. All that said, so this is the agenda of what we're going to go through today. So first, what is point-to-point encryption? What's the difference between a point-to-point encryption solution and a PCI solution during the assessment there? What Target decided to do or why we decided to do it? The different types of P2PE solutions. We'll talk a little bit about what Target's solution is, and most importantly, probably why you're all here, is what should you do? Now, I'm sure that P2PE is familiar for many of you, but to make sure we're all grounded in the same place, I want to talk about what is point-to-point encryption. Well, at a high level, it's rather simple. It's when credit card numbers are encrypted at the point of interaction device with keys the merchant does not have access to. Really, that's it. Later on, it's likely decrypted at a service provider or an acquiring bank. That might be the same for you. But the key is that the merchant never sees the card number. Pun intended, that's the key. Now, moving on to this slide here, we're talking about what is the difference between the solutions. Well, it's not like you can do point-to-point encryption without being PCI compliant. But when I talk to folks about doing a P2PE assessment, they always want to talk about it in terms of their point-to-point encryption solution. Talk about it in terms of their PCI assessment. And so the question is, when you do both, what changes? Well, when you do a PCI assessment along with a point-to-point encryption assessment, you get a reduced scope. And this is where I'll stop and be corrected because it's not necessarily a reduced scope. It's a reduced scope validation. See, from a PCI assessment, if you have a scope and then you do a P2PE assessment for part of that scope, it's not like that scope is reduced. For that P2PE environment, your validation, what you have to validate, is reduced. And so effectively you reduce scope, but technically it's still the same. My QSA does a great job correcting me on that all the time. The other thing you'll be working with is validated solutions. If you've never worked with a P2PE solution, and you're used to a PCI environment, you're used to working with applications where everything is tested and validated the same way, and environments are all tested in the same way. Well, when you're doing a P2PE assessment, you're working with validated solutions that a different QSA has already validated and looked at. And so what you're responsible for doing is different. You're probably reduced in what you have to look at for that validated solution you're bringing in. The next thing is it's honestly just a different document too, be that a P2PE SAQ or a P2PE full assessment, depending on your implementation, you'll be working with a different document. And last but not least, I would be remiss if I didn't say you had an opportunity to take more training. because you do in P2P. There's more training you can take, and the council did a great job. There's actually really good P2P training you can take to help set you up for success, both implementing and managing your solution. Now, all that said, the question you should probably be asking if you haven't done it before is it worth it? Should I take this step and implement a P2P solution? Well, that really breaks down to 3 questions. Is it hard? Is it expensive? And what are the benefits? Well, I can take the first 2 now. It's not that hard. It's definitely complex. If you were here for the last panel, you heard us talk about some timelines to implement and how long it might take and who you'd have to work with, and definitely finding some trusted advisors. But it's not necessarily hard. It does take time. Is it expensive? Well, I won't lie to you. It's not free. You're going to be buying some type of a solution to some degree. You're going to be likely hiring a QSA for something beyond what you've done before with them. And so there is some expense involved. But I can tell you, from Target's standpoint, we've definitely saved money by going this direction. And it's probably not close. Now, some of that's soft savings. As you implement a P2P solution, we talked about scope, validation, reduction. So team members that we have that used to be focused on compliance initiatives now have less that they have to do for compliance in that environment. And so there's definitely time that we're saving there and some soft savings. However, there's absolutely hard savings that we've enjoyed. As for the benefits, well, that really takes us to why did we do it? Well, the first comes down to actually a difference between point-to-point encryption and end-to-end encryption. I showed you the P2P slide at the beginning of what it is, and an end-to-end solution may look very similar to that. In fact, it might be very similar, but the difference, as Viv mentioned on the last panel, is really that validation. So with an end-to-end solution, you're going to validate every year with a QSA that it meets the requirements for that scope, validation, reduction. And then that has to be accepted by your acquiring bank every year. And that is a risk that Target couldn't take. As we went through, that was definitely our first step, and that's what helped us on our journey to point-to-point encryption. But we couldn't take that risk that on any year, a QSA might say, hey, sorry, something changed in the environment and this isn't acceptable anymore. Or it would get to an acquiring bank and they said, sorry, in the larger environment, we're no longer able to do it because of this reason. And then that scope validation reduction would no longer exist. And that would be a huge lift for Target to bring all of our stores back into scope. And so that's the first thing. We couldn't accept that risk. As for true benefits, well, there is that scope reduction or scope validation reduction. For us, that's 1,800 stores, 60,000 registers and point of interaction devices that no longer have that same level of scope. And all the team members that are checking folks out, all the network closets, the network environments in those stores no longer have that same level of validation required. And that is a huge benefit. And that's allowed us to focus on some of those key initiatives. After all, that's what we're here for, really, is focus on key business initiatives, right? Well, perhaps not here, but when you go back to your offices, if these days you ever go back to an office, actually, that's what your goal is, really, is to drive key business initiatives, right? And so that's allowed us to spend more time focused on those initiatives. Last, and certainly not least, is the solution is secure by design. I don't know about you, but whenever I implemented a solution, especially a POS solution or a point of interaction device, and you have to bolt on controls to make it secure and compliant, that never felt like a good solution to me. Well, this solution is secure by design. What you implement, you no longer have to worry about someone in the stores accessing your cardholder data. And that makes me less worried every night. Excuse me just a second here. So all that said, did you know that there are actually different point-to-point encryption solutions? No, I don't mean that there's a different solution provider down there, multiple solution providers that you can use. I'm sure there are. I mean, fundamentally, there's two different approaches that the Council allows you to take to achieve point-to-point encryption. The first is a standard P2P solution where you're buying something from a vendor. The second, though, is a customized point-to-point encryption merchant-managed solution. And that name is not a misnomer. It's truly managed by the merchant. And so you might ask, well, what are the differences? Well, with a standard solution, you're really buying that entire solution from your acquirer or from a P2P solution provider. Not many are here. There's a number listed on the DSS website you can choose from, though also others exist. But with that merchant-managed solution, you're building the solution, likely with the help of a number of different solution providers or component providers, as it's called in P2P. Now, in both cases, you're going to have vendors. But with that merchant-managed solution, you get to select which are the best vendors for you in each case. So both the merchant-managed solution and the standard solution, standard off-the-shelf solution, offer that scope validation reduction. In fact, the standard implementation where you're buying something off the shelf may be easier to implement. In fact, it's likely easier to manage because you're buying it from one vendor, and then you have one vendor's compliance to manage. But where that merchant-managed solution really shines is with the customization and flexibility. You're no longer tied to one vendor. You can implement your own software and customization for seamless integration with other in-house solutions. And you may even be able to leverage that payment device for uses beyond taking payment. These are the list of component types. Within that point-to-point encryption solution, these are the different component types you can select from in that merchant-managed solution, and select vendors for each of them. Select multiple vendors for some of them. And that's key. You can select what you need and what best meets your needs to achieve your goals with each of these different components. And so, what did Target end up choosing? Well, perhaps you could tell where I was going. Target went with a merchant-managed solution. See, that allowed us to select a vendor that would offer that decryption environment and support that encryption environment, but also allowed us to select vendors to support a nationwide rollout where we can test, though, with each of those different components to make sure we find the right solution for us. And so why did we choose the merchant-managed solution? Well, it allows for that flexibility. I failed in the slide before to mention about the PIM and what that is. So when you buy a point-to-point encryption solution, it comes with an implementation guide or an implementation manual. And so that guide is what you have to follow to implement your solution in a way that meets compliance and security. But it's the same for everybody that vendor sells it to. And so for Target, by implementing a merchant-managed solution, we're able to build that guide. So we're able to look at our stores and understand how does that process work, or how do processes work in that environment? What do we do at our headquarters environment? And what can we build to ensure that what we implement can be met by both the team members and in the environment? It also allows us to use the devices for things beyond payment. So think drive up, order pickup, Starbucks pickup, to name a few. Close your eyes for me. Think back to your last Target run. Hopefully that was recently for many of you. And when you did that, if you're anything like me, first you had your drive up, and you had them bring your Starbucks, and you probably even did a return from a car. If you didn't know, it's totally cool. You can do returns from a car. And then you realize you forgot something. Your wife texts you like, hey, can you run and get this? But it's probably something you're not sure if they have, so you might need to call and see if they even have it while you're waiting for that order to come out, especially since they're picking up your Starbucks on the way. But through that process, it was seamless for you as a guest. That person came out, they brought you your order, they did the return, they had your Starbucks, and that's all because it's on one device, just like this. From that team member's perspective, All of the solutions that they're working on in that store is all on one mobile device. I don't have to train a team member to pull out a device to take your order, to pull out a different device to deliver your drive-up order, or to have a phone that they can answer a call from you. Everything is on one device, and that allows for an easy training experience that a team member can easily implement, and it allows for a seamless guest experience. Now, last but not least, though, this solution also allows that flexible vendor option. We're able to leverage the vendors that are best for us. All vendors have their pros and cons, right? This way, we get to pick the ones that are best for us and at the best cost. Now, the question really is, what should you do, right? That's ultimately why you're here. Well, hopefully, I've been effective in my goal in convincing you all to spend more time on your compliance approaches or compliance solutions. If you don't have a point-to-point encryption solution, consider it. They're not that much more expensive, truly, if at all. You do gain security benefit, and you reduce your scope validation. I said it right that time. And if you do have a standard P2PE solution, and you're looking for more flexibility and customization, consider the merchant managed solution. It's truly been a game changer for Target. Now, before I go, I'm going to ask one more time, who here has a point-to-point encryption solution that they're leveraging? Okay, if you have questions, these are the people to talk to. Feel free to reach out to me if there's anything we can do to support you. We'd be happy to discuss it further, and have a great rest of your meeting. Thanks.